Welcome back. We look forward to the rest of the time with you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our lunch keynote speaker, Governor Eric Holcomb. You know, unlike some people, when you make an introduction and you get the whole, full 1-page or 2-page of the introduction, he's happy to just be introduced as Indiana's 51st governor. So please join me in welcoming the governor.
Same place, different year, different chair.
Yes, that's right. Well, we've been laughing because those of you who were with us a couple years ago, there's a little difference in stature between the governor and the commissioner. We had chairs that time where his knees were touching his nose, and my legs were still out like this because they wouldn't touch the ground. So I think we've compromised, and we have a chair that's somewhere in the middle right now.
The picture went viral in our office.
Well, thank you for being back with us. You were here a couple years ago for the Weldon Conference. You know, this is our annual convening where we bring together higher education leaders and employers. And this year we've made a real intentional effort to actually invite our K-12 colleagues to be with us, and many of them are in the audience as well. But a lot's happened since you were here 2 years ago. I suppose that's always the case when you're the governor. And I made mention in some of my morning remarks that we were talking about how we actually make sure that Hoosiers understand this message of being prepared for the world of work. And no one does that better than our governor, and no one really can do that in the way that a governor does. He has multiple opportunities to interact with Hoosiers, to really talk to them about why this whole issue of education and training beyond high school is so important and more important than ever. And I made mention of the fact that several things have changed, the creation of the Governor's Workforce Cabinet, and we had P.J. McGrew with us on the panel this morning sharing some information about that. All of the efforts under Next Level Jobs that we've been working on, and certainly at the Commission in partnership with the colleges and universities, we've been working on the Workforce Ready grant to make sure that people understand the importance of that. And then most recently, your appointment as one of 2 governors, I believe, is that correct?
Correct.
On the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. In fact, we'll make sure that we allow the governor to leave by about 12:45 or so, because he's leaving to take a conference call as the co-chair of one of the working groups for that group that met for the first time just a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C. So with that as a background, I want to give you an opportunity to just share a few thoughts about some of these changes that have taken place in Indiana, how Indiana is viewed in the national landscape as well, and how you see opportunities for Hoosiers changing.
Well, in my opinion, it's all upside. You know, at the last 2 nights, as an example, I've been reminded about the challenge that's ahead of us and ahead of the world. You mentioned some travel that I've taken recently as well. But the last 2 dinner conversations I've had in our residence have centered on, can you supply my company, if I locate in the state of Indiana, with the workforce that I need to grow? It comes right down to that. You know, companies will go where the people are, or where they can be, where they're skilled up, where they can be skilled up, or where you can attract people to move to. And so understanding that, we have to make sure that our pipeline is not leaking, and that we're skilling up people at every stage of their life or their career. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same situation next year as we are this year, with 100,000 unfilled jobs. That's an underreported number, in my opinion, and 1 million that need to be filled over the next decade. So we know what the challenge is, and so therefore we had to reassess as a state, how are we doing this, just to be simple about it. That required us to streamline, that required us to be more nimble, more agile, that required us to be more aligned with the Commission of Higher Education, with the Department of Education, with the business community, the private sector at large. We know that, you know, the linchpin is, if the private sector is doing well, I've had this discussion with the folks on the Workforce Commission in Washington, if the private sector is doing well, it makes our job not easy, but easier. If the private sector is not doing well, if we're not able to supply them with the workforce that they need to meet the demands of the marketplace, then it makes everything else harder. And if businesses are growing, that's going to create more opportunities for people to grow in careers, meaningful careers. That will enable our communities to grow and therefore our state. So it's a cyclical exercise. And so therefore we started over and we said, okay, if we were to create this structure from day one, how would it look? And that's where that cabinet came from. Obviously we've received some attention for our efforts, collective efforts by Washington, and they asked the Iowa governor, Kim Reynolds, who's a superstar, and myself, and there's 3 government officials, the governor of Iowa, myself, and then the mayor of Charlotte. And they provide the government perspective because we're, on the ground. And so that's how we've kind of turned this ship around, is reassessing and realigning our state efforts.
So how do you think Indiana is perceived by employers or and vis-a-vis other states in this workforce space? Are we seen as a place that is well on the road to having what employers need? Or, is our workforce a draw, or do we still have a huge challenge?
We still have a huge challenge, as does everyone, but our workforce is a draw. We have a kind of a famous Midwestern work ethic about us that goes way beyond our borders. We have companies that have been trailblazers, that have created their own cook pathways, or when Vincennes University or Ivy Tech or ISU are creating these talent pipelines with or connections with businesses, that is in and of itself eye-opening to the businesses. The last 2 nights, when I've sat down and said, look, here's a menu, here are your options to find nutritionists, to find marketing, to find legal, to find, and we'll give you the name and number of the person that you need to be in contact with. So this is somewhat new. And then investing through Next Level Jobs, et cetera, and there's a myriad of, or a number of different options and programs. But through Next Level Jobs, that's an effort to right now fill those jobs that are out there that we know, those 100,000, represented by those 100,000 vacancies, to skill up people right now to fill the jobs that are there right now that happen to be, as you say often, high wage, high demand jobs. Mm-hmm. So we're perceived as being no longer in denial. I had this conversation with a minister in India, of all places, and I said, we're going to crack this code, this workforce development code. Workforce development is economic development. And I said, we're going to crack this code. And she looked at me and she said, you'll be the first. And a lot of people have been making, have tried and actually succeeded in different areas. But to actually crack it, to build the structure so that it's all moving harmoniously in unison with one another, that's where you truly start to take it to the next level.
So when you look at the culture of Indiana, we talked a little bit about this morning, where certainly a high school diploma in the past, my parents' generation, certainly was
sufficient?
It was sufficient, and even an 8th grade education in many fields, and we know that's not the case anymore. And when you try to actually communicate a message, and we had this question come up this morning about, how do we communicate this message to Hoosiers about why they have to change their level of education and training, and when does that start? So we have a group here, and we wanted, much like the Governor's Workforce Cabinet tries to deal with these silos, we're trying to do this especially with this group between K-12 and higher education and then the workforce, where we are all invested in the success of the individual in life, and all these are markers along the way. But how do we communicate, how do you communicate this when you're talking to Hoosiers around the state and you're actually asking them to change their behavior, change how they act in order to meet the needs of this new economy?
Well, you don't have to look very far to see the economy has changed on you, for the better, by the way, and along the way improving the quality of life in so many respects. And it depends on what audience I'm in front of and at what stage of their career they're in. If they're younger, actually I've found that the younger the person I'm talking to, the more accepting they are that change is not just inevitable, but it's operating at an unprecedented speed and pace. And you need look no further than your cell phone. And what I always say is, this thing every once in a while you get an update or you get a notice to update your system. And a lot of research and development goes into that. Millions of dollars is spent on that product to make sure that it is keeping pace and outpacing the competition. And the same, if we're going to invest that in our products, we have to invest that in our people, if not more so. And but that requires a system overhaul as well. And as frequent as our products that we're selling. And so this is lifelong. You mentioned your example. I'll mention mine. I came across the first newspaper in the state of Indiana was the Vinson Sun Commercial. My folks are from Knox County. Came across a newspaper article in 1945 of my great-grandfather with my father, who's about 5 years old. They're in the blacksmith shop that he started in 1895. And he's looking out in Oaktown, Indiana, at downtown Oaktown in the newspaper article. And they're interviewing my grandfather about how life has changed from 1895 to 1945. And my grandfather says, the good Lord gave it and he replaced it with rubber. Like, he wasn't mad about that. He said, I'm not a rich guy, but I've lived a rich life. And he's learned along the way. And then he pointed to my dad. This is in the article that I'm reading. He points to my dad and he says, and this guy right here, he's already building things. He may be doing the equivalent of shoeing one day, whatever that might be, horseshoeing. And my father goes on to Purdue University, becomes an engineer, and spends his lifetime trying to build aircraft to fly higher and faster. Right, so from Oaktown, from a dirt floor blacksmith shop, building things with his hands, he became attached to something he was very passionate about, enjoyed, reflective of his personality. And then the sky was the limit, or not even the sky was the limit, I guess, in that example. But that now, him working at the same place, Plant 5, which became Rolls-Royce, Allison at the beginning, that's kind of the exception to the rule. People are much more transitory. People are moving around more frequently, upgrading their system or their well-being, and that should be, I think, embraced because, again, we're competing against the best minds in the world, and so it goes right back to what is our pipeline, and how are we maintaining that pipeline, and what are we investing in that pipeline. Because it's going to be, again, reflective of what's the output.
Well, we're so appreciative of the fact that you talk about human capital and you talk about the human infrastructure. We've done so much in Indiana, with the infrastructure, with the tax, with other tax policies and other things that make a difference about employers coming here and the quality of people's lives. But as you have said so many times, it really is about the workforce and human capital and the infrastructure. Before we pivot a little bit to talk about this transition from high school to college, I want to talk just a little bit more about the Workforce Ready grant and the work that we're doing and how we're approaching these changes in the economy and the kinds of jobs that are going to be available. Most of you will be aware of this, but when we looked at the development of the Workforce Ready grant, and we looked at what other states were doing in terms of whether it was Tennessee with free community college, we already had the 21st Century Scholars Program in Indiana, which made it possible for someone who was low income to leave high school and go to college. But we knew we had, and then we did the You Can Go Back proposal, working with many of our colleges and universities for people who had some college but no degree to try to entice them to come back and make it easier for them to come back. And we're still working on that. We had about, 14,000 people who came back and re-enrolled, and we're still working on that. But what became clear was that we had a whole other group of people out there who didn't have any quality credential at all, and they were working age adults. And so, as you know, we came up with these 5 sectors, and then working with Ivy Tech and Vincennes, about 150 certificates under those sectors that we know are really going to be helpful to people in getting a job. And I guess, we now are at the point where we've had incredible interest. We've had a lot of people who have come back. We've had about 38,000 who have filled out an application to come back. We've had about 5,000 who are enrolled. We got to get the rest of them to do something too. We've got to motivate the rest of the people to make a decision that is in their best interest, but it's hard. I mean, requiring them to make a change in their lives and their working. Is there anything that this group can do to encourage people? And then I also want one other mention. The other thing that the legislature did in concert with the governor's office is to actually make it possible for now graduating high school students to actually get the Workforce Ready grant. So we have a new way to actually talk about pathways for high school students. You may go to a four-year college, you may get an associate's degree, but the state will also pay for you to get one of these high-quality certificates. This is, it's not as easy as saying we have free community college. We're saying we have a more complicated message that we're trying to convey. I think it's the right message, and I think we're coming up with the right areas, but, how can this group help us talk about next-level jobs and right fit for people based on these needs of the economy?
Well, through your channels and through your associations and through your normal PR efforts, it has to be institutionalized. And for the most part, you've done a lot of advertising of this, and so have we, but it's really a fraction of where it needs to be. One thing that I've just noticed, and this is I mean this as a compliment about our state government, that is, in the State House. That is, we typically all come with agendas. Whatever year it is, here's my agenda, got all these boxes, check these boxes, did that, move on to the next thing. And what other product in the world does just that? Sometimes you can have a poor product and you can put 80% of your budget behind advertising it, and you can sell a lot of poor quality product. So we have to go way beyond kind of word of mouth, and we have to get aggressive about initiating and finding the people that are out there. You talked about the people without, that started college and quit, or that don't have a high school diploma or the equivalent of one, or the 27,000 incarcerated. So all of a sudden you're up to 1 million people, right? And we got 1 million jobs we got to fill in the next decade, and this is going to be constant turnover for the next 10 years. And so what are we doing, the state, your organizations, what are we doing to reach out and find people and then connect them to the resources that they need and to the ultimate career or job? And that goes through a certificate. One thing that you and I both saw was at my most recent State of the State address, I had Brandy she went through a program to get a certificate in welding, et cetera. A couple others too, but in welding. That's what she enjoyed. And I congratulated her at the State of the State address, said, congratulations, you already have a promotion. And after that, after the State of the State address, we have people come over to the house, and my wife makes chili and grilled cheese. And we had everybody that I referenced over for grilled cheese and chili. And she came up to me and she goes, Eric, the best part about getting those certificates is not that it got me a promotion, but I know the pathway to get further promotions. So I know how to not go from $40,000 a year, but to $50,000 a year, to $60,000 a year. And she is, as you may recall, owns her own home for the first time in life. She not only has a first chance at a new life, but she is affecting others around her. So the point being is we have to find those people wherever they are, because right now seemingly so many people are just drowning in this sea of opportunity and busy lives, as you always say. Life interrupts, life intervenes, something happened. Your parents are doing heroin over in the corner, and you can't. You want to go back to college. You have higher expectations for yourself, but you've got some hurdles, whether it be housing or transportation or what have you. So I think as each of our organizations, we have to do a much better job of reaching out to the different cohorts and finding them even when they're not even looking to us. And then we have to continue our efforts, as is what's happening all over the place in the state of Indiana. We have to create places where people want to live, because look, you look at our birth rate, death rate in Indiana, and we're not going to grow ourselves into these jobs. We have to bring in, and so that's what's exciting about companies like Emphasis, who is going to hire 3,000. They've hired 500 already. 60% of their new hires are from out of state. They'll hire more. They've got 2,500 more people to hire right out of our universities or right off the street. But what they're doing is helping us remain an in-migration state, and we're going to need to do that too. And then they've got to be attached to programs that can continue to skill them up. So it's that, again, the alignment between the educational system, state government, and the private sector that has to be kind of all oriented in the same direction.
So much like we're trying to make sure that we keep people in Indiana, and about, more than 75% of our college graduates stay in Indiana. That's a good news story. We think, when they have opportunities like that, we'll stay. We're trying to bring people to Indiana. We know that their birth rates are not going to help us in this regard, and it certainly is a challenge for our colleges. So, we have those two things that we're working on. We're working on two things that we're talking about today, which is skilling up the returning adults who come back to the workforce. And then today, very intentionally, we're talking about the pipeline as well. We're talking about those students who are actually in our K-12 sector and are transitioning. We're trying to do a better job making sure that they understand this connection between the relevance of what they're learning and what they want to do, because we think that will encourage them to actually stay engaged. But how young is it too young to start talking about jobs and opportunities, and how do we do that? Do we do that, with our navigation in middle school? Do we actually start earlier than that? And how do we make sure we give full opportunities for all, but also recognize aspirations and preparations and the needs of the economy in a way that is, I referred to this morning, not godlike, in that we're not telling people what they have to do, but we're providing better opportunities for people to understand what's out there.
Well, if you've met my father, he was probably looking forward to me getting out of the house when I was in kindergarten. So he was probably, saying, get this kid skilled up, sooner the better. And I certainly, there were high expectations and standards in our house. But I would say it's never too early. It depends on what the cell is, though, at what stage in someone's life. But it's never too early to spark an interest and to I always say that the closer you can get to doing what you love, then it becomes closer to a vacation, not a vocation. It becomes, you're almost doing it and you don't care what the salary is because you enjoy it that much. And by the way, people who are doing what they love tend to be some of the best at it. And so I would say middle school is too late to actually start to help people explore all the different options and pathways there are to success, their personalized success, whether it's in theater or designing the next radar. Starting in middle school is probably too late, and we know that globally. So my mother was a third grade teacher. That might be coming through in me right now. That's I always say when I learned life was not going to be fair, when I had my own mother as a teacher. But she certainly didn't wait till after. Right. This started very early on. And I would say in moderation, that's probably the wrong word, but it depends. It does matter how you're steering someone into their options. It's not, we're not drones. We're not saying you're going to be a construction worker, you're going to be a mathematician, you're going to be a statistician. It is here, it's wide open. It's wide open, and more so than ever that you get to determine your destiny. The only requirement is that you're connected to the skill set that helps you continue to learn along the way, and that's what's changed from the 8th grade education requirement, the bicep. This is all about the brain now. This is about how we're continually to develop.
I think that's right, and when you think about I often think about it that when children are young, it's a very wide funnel, and it's you're exposing them to all the options that are out there, and then as they get older, based on their aspirations and the preparations and the needs of the economy, the funnel gets more narrow, and then you start nudging people to the places where they're likely to feel fulfilled, knowing they have the option to make those decisions as they would choose to make them.
And maybe also just to take into account, I'm not a paperback psychiatrist here, but also something that's reflective of their personality, what they enjoy doing. That's a big part of this, and I'm looking out at the president of ISU here. My older brother went to 3 different colleges before he found his way. And there were a number of people in our family that had expectations for him to do other things, or thought he would be great in this. And so he tried different things. It wasn't until he went to Indiana State University, got a degree in construction technology, aced it, and went on, and he's making 8 times more money than I'll ever make in my life right now. And he got that education at ISU because that
But you have a meaningful career.
True, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, he's not referred to me as governor yet, but I mean, Judd, you know. No, but we're both doing something we enjoy. And in my case, it's public service. In his case, it's building things. But he went to the best, where he could connect with the skill set that he needed to excel.
So we're going to do everything we can to make sure people understand the needs of the economy and we prepare them for jobs, and then the world's going to change. And the jobs are going to change, and we have to be prepared. It's exciting. And we have to be prepared to help people. I think it's not that new opportunities are going to come.
Yep.
Many of those jobs may even have the same name that they had before, but the skill sets may be different. And so this relationship, it seems to me, between employers and educators is, in a legitimate way, more important than ever, with an obligation that higher ed has to be open to lifelong learning for people and bringing people back. And employers have to be committed to their workforce and things like tuition reimbursement and encouraging people. And I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, that the employers who do that well and create that kind of a ecosystem within their workforce will both retain people and there'll be a sense that you want to work in that place. But, you know, what about this changing nature of the world of work and how we prepare people for the jobs of today and the dramatic changes that we're going to be facing, you know, in the next decade or two?
Well, I mean, the conversation will never be over. This will always be the case. If you were to have interviewed Christopher Columbus in 1492 and asked him about technology.
I'm old, but not that old.
Yeah. I'm not saying you have, but well, he would have said that the technology he used to chart his course was pretty much the same as it was 500 years prior to that, the stars. But fast forward 500 years from 1492 to 1992, and a lot's changed. And it's becoming increasingly faster, that pace and the scale of change. To me, that's exciting if you're prepared.
Right.
It is daunting and scary if you're not. And so that's why it's incumbent upon us to prepare and to invest in our employees or our citizens, et cetera. And we get to, and it's true around the world. Recently, I took a trip to a trade mission with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, and we went to a few countries in Europe. We're in France. And I meet with the ambassador of France, Jamie McCourt, go to a dinner, step off the plane, meet with the ambassador, go to a dinner. It's about a 3-hour dinner, head table. You know, I got a former ambassador to Moscow, Russia, sitting to my left, and I got the former French ambassador. I've got the New York Times, I've got the French television, Channel 1, the biggest television station, packed room, and it's a 3-hour grilling of what's going on in America, basically. Now, I'm the governor of Indiana, right? And so, you know, I'm doing my own, holding my own. But it comes back to this, what you're talking about, how the world has changed. Now, this is in Paris. This is where yellow jackets are in the downtown squares and violence has erupted. This is where, in that exact week, there had been 3 failed votes for Brexit. This is where Merkel, May, and Macron right now are all getting together trying to figure out how do we address the have versus the have-nots and what's coming because of that. So it's not just America. It is South Africa. You pick your place, Brazil, Venezuela, It's global in nature. And so it is who India, I had this conversation with the minister, it is how are we going to skill up our workforce as fast as the world is changing. And that requires us all to not just be nimble and agile and to respond to the demands of the marketplace, meaning curriculum, et cetera, not to be driving by each other, to be invested lifelong too. When you say life, it's going to require lifelong learning. That means lifelong investment from someone. I mean, the investment's got to come from somewhere. It could come from the employer, but in many respects now it's also incumbent upon a state or a city to develop the community. And so it's, to me, the playing field or the competition is global. And just because there's machine learning and big data and AI, the things that you referred to, that creates more opportunity in my mind. It never lessens. It may streamline jobs, but it creates, in many respects, a whole lot more opportunity and a whole lot more high-paying opportunity if only we can fill those jobs here at home.
And let's be honest, I mean, even if some of us don't like all the changes, change is happening, and we don't want to be the Luddites and pretend that life is going to go back to the way it was. We have to be prepared, and education is the best way to be prepared for those changes. So we're in the process of the commission this year undertaking strategic planning. It'll be our 4th strategic plan. Our current one is Reaching Higher, Delivering Value. In each of these plans, they've been evolutionary in their development because we never complete everything with the plan. It's not as if we're turning the page and starting all over again. We're building on what we were to go to the next place. As you think about the commission and higher education planning for the future and doing strategic planning, is there anything in particular that you think higher ed needs to think about in strategic planning?
Sure. Kind of a loaded question. I think about a lot. I would, if I were to organize it, I care a lot about graduation rates, I care a lot about debt rate, care a lot about placement rate, and specifically in the state of Indiana. And I'm not opposed to people. I'm one of these people. I went to college, and then I wanted to go see the world. I did. I came home. But how we become sticky, how we keep the people that we educate and attach them to opportunity here, that may also allow them to see the world, by the way. And so placement rates are key to me that I would say should be front and center. That gets at a couple issues that we've already touched on. How we are personalizing our product. In today's world, everything is, again, it's coming right to us right here. There is a menu, there is an answer to everything right here. How we are educated, and it's happening now, but think about it 10 years from now, how people will consume. And so further personalizing those options. And then what I touched on earlier is, what are we all doing to reach out to segments of society, some that have been sidelined, but others who could be doing more and would be doing more. That's what we're finding out, that people really do that. And you talked about the number of people that have first gone to the nextleveljobs.org website, and then who have enrolled, and then who have completed. And so we have a 300,000 unique individual hits on that website, north of 300,000 actually, and then it just tapers down from there, right? Because life intervenes, as you say. But we do know that there is a aspiration for an individual to take it to the next level or to improve their station in life. So what are we doing with that space? And then what are we doing in city after city after city after city to go out and find and recruit and offer? Here's a pathway for you, and no matter what, again, stage that they find themselves in.
So how does the way that we have started thinking and about regions of the state, how does that help us with the message that we give? And I guess let me step back a minute. One of the criticisms I think that sometimes we have in higher ed is that we'll hear from people who'll say to us, you're basically, you're encouraging our sons and daughters to go to college and they aren't going to come back home again. And it seems to me that this way of thinking regionally provides an opportunity for someone to live where they might want to live, maybe even close to where they grew up, and have educational and employment opportunities, thinking less about a county line and more about a region. Is that working?
Yes, better in some places than others. We do know that to be good stewards of state resources, we need to think regionally. We need to quit spilling our resources or duplicating our efforts. In part, we can achieve that through a regional approach. It also encourages, forces might be too strong of a word, but it encourages counties to think and act harmoniously or in unison, and better enables the state to do so as well with those regions. We know that when I'm sitting down again at a dinner trying to recruit someone to invest, we just yesterday, a Canadian company is investing $310 million, 450 new jobs, careers. Today, earlier this morning, we announced another 300 new jobs up in Hamilton County. The first was in Shelby. Thursday, we'll go over 1,000 new jobs for the week. Every single time, this is not my secret equation. It is that whatever industry they're in or sector, they're looking at, is location important to them? In Indiana, right in the heart of the heartland, very important location. Do we have the infrastructure to get their products to market? Then they go down to what they already know, because their site selectors have helped them with this, but they know what kind of tax and regulatory environment. Is it a pro-growth, pro-business environment that encourages growth? Then they get down to, will you be able to supply? We're going to go where the people are, where they're skilled up, or where we can attract them. Can you do that? And then they get into what you're talking about here, which is increasingly in the conversation, and that is, am I able to go to a place where my employees will love to live? Live. And not just work, but live. And that goes back to what investments are we making in quality of place, or quality of life, sometimes people say. But and part of that is our counties working together, like there are no lines there, on water infrastructure projects, on, just think about it, new, like if you were creating it today, jails, and then is the state and the local communities, counties, regions working in unison. Very key to attracting people and keeping people. So how do you describe where you live in 2 sentences or less? What is your pitch? What is your case that you're making on why to live where you do?
Well, I have several other questions I would love to ask, but I know we're down to just a couple more minutes for time. So just a personal question at the end. You are a graduate of Hanover, and right?
Am I going to reveal something here that I'm going to regret?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. We've been friends for a long time.
So, reflecting upon your own college experience and your life following that, did you feel well prepared when you left? And are there things that we can do better to prepare people for meaningful careers and lives? And just, you're welcome to sing Hanover's praises if you would like.
I did and I do. Hanover taught me, first of all, again, my father was an engineer and I went to Hanover, a liberal arts school. He literally said, when I came home and said, I'm going to go to Hanover, he said, what will you learn there? I said, well, I'm going to figure that out. I don't know the answer yet. And he goes, you're going to spend the rest of your life asking why to everything. But they encouraged us. My parents encouraged us to pursue what we were interested in. And I will say Hanover did just that. Hanover fostered, encouraged exploration and discovery like no other place I had experienced to date in life. And so our professors, the school was constantly introducing you to more experiences that forced you to think about, what is it that I am passionate about? Where can I contribute? And every one of my friends went into something different. For me, it tapped into public service, and not government service, by the way. After Hanover, I went into the military. But I would say that Hanover experience and what it exposed, the encouragement of critical thinking and being prepared to do whatever came your way, not to be intimidated by failure, by the way, but to embrace the big world that was awaiting. And that's what I would say has prepared me for the job that I have right now as well. And so that's also, by the way, when Emphasis talks about who they want to hire, they're not just talking about informatics or statisticians or coders. They're also they're talking about the full spectrum. And because we have to communicate with different segments of the society, in their business plan at least, differently. And so a true classical liberal arts education gave me that breadth and depth to take that next step, whatever it was going to be.
Well, we're glad you took the steps that you did and that you ended up as governor of the state of Indiana. So I think we just wanted to express our appreciation to you for really leading on these issues and make a commitment to you that we're all engaged in this work and want to be helpful. We want to get to that 60% goal that we talk about. We want to get to the right fit for people, and you are certainly leading. So please join me in thanking the governor.
Thank you. Thank you.